Reginald Reggie Fairbanks was a picture of paradox, a silver-haired octogenarian with the world's newest hypercar gleaming in his driveway, but dressed in a patched corduroy jacket striped with unintended flair and mismatched shoes that might once have been fashionable in a bygone era. The moment he stepped into the gleaming lobby of Starline Luxury Motors, an upscale dealership nestled on Sunset Boulevard, the room's hush turned to glances of incredulity. Some handlers raised polished eyebrows, and one hostess paled mid-sip of her chai latte. Reggie had always believed that true wealth was worn in deeds, not threads. He'd spent a lifetime amassing art, funds, and experiences. He'd crossed the Sahara, brokered coalitions, lived through more market crashes than a vintage ticker tape. Yet he had a peculiar disregard for aesthetics. His clothes were decades outdated, his socks worn through, his tie a faded paisley, vaguely nostalgic. The dealership's manager, a fastidious woman named Veronica Cade, approached him with a smile that faltered when she took in his ensemble. Despite his polite request to see the newest limited edition Valkyr SS convertible, she hesitated. "Sir," she said, her voice iced with practiced poise, "I'm afraid we have a dress code." A murmur rippled through the assembled VIP clients. Being told off for attire was humiliating, especially at 82. But equally, it sparked something in Reggie's chest, a surge of indignation tinged with amusement. He straightened his back. "A dress code?" he asked. His voice was calm, the kind of quiet that demanded attention. "I didn't know we were attending a debutante ball." The room grew still. A younger sales associate choked on his water. Veronica blinked, as if waking from a dream. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't accommodate you unless you change." There were whispers. Reggie could feel their eyes, some curious, some sneering, but mostly bewildered. He tipped an invisible hat to them. "Then I'll take my custom Valkyr elsewhere." And with that, Reggie pivoted on stiff knees and made to leave. The sun beat down on the Los Angeles pavement as Reggie stepped outside, the heavy dealership doors hissing shut behind him like a final insult. For a moment, he just stood there, soaking in the absurdity. He hadn't come for drama, just to indulge in a little nostalgia and buy himself one last joyride for his birthday. But being treated like a vagrant rather than a millionaire, that stirred an old fire in him. Reggie's driver, a loyal war buddy turned personal assistant named Hank, was parked nearby in a nondescript black SUV. When Reggie climbed in, Hank gave him a sideways glance. "They throw you out." "Wouldn't let me browse." "Wrong uniform," Reggie said dryly, brushing lint from his lapel. Hank chuckled, then glanced at the dealership through the rearview mirror. "You want me to make a call? Have him Googled into shame?" Reggie considered it. "No," he said. "I've got something better in mind. Let's make a stop." 10 minutes later, they pulled into the glossy underground garage of the Fairbanks Financial Trust building, a structure Reggie had quietly funded back in the 90s. Upstairs, in his modest office, modest for a billionaire, he logged into an encrypted terminal and made a few calculated keystrokes. Reggie owned 8% of Caldwell Automotive, the parent company of Starline Luxury Motors. He wasn't a hands-on investor. He left that to his analysts, but he hadn't lost his touch for shifting numbers when it suited him. With a smirk, he emailed his private broker. "Divert $2. 3M from discretionary fund. Buy out the exclusive allocation rights for all Valkyr SS convertibles bound for the Southern California market. Every single one." Then he called his old friend Lenny Kimura, a luxury auto designer turned rebel mechanic who ran a custom garage in East L.A. "Lenny," Reggie said, "you ever built a fleet for a billionaire with a grudge?" Lenny didn't skip a beat. "Sounds like Tuesday. What you got in mind?" Over the next hour, while the dealership staff in Beverly Hills resumed their polished dance of wealth and aesthetics, Reggie and Lenny outlined a plan to modify every single Valkyr SS that would have gone to Starline. Upgraded interiors, unique Fairbanks insignias, even new, more inclusive branding, less pomp, more punch. Within the hour, the order was placed. Reggie leaned back in his leather chair, a glimmer of satisfaction dancing behind his tired eyes. Let them choke on velvet ropes and carbon fiber dreams. Just to make sure the point landed, he added a final flourish, an invitation sent via courier to Starline's top management. "You're cordially invited to the unveiling of the Valkyr SS, hosted by Reginald Fairbanks. Dress code, comfort." He attached a single photo, Himself, grinning, seated on the hood of an old Ford Pinto in the very clothes they rejected him for. Back at Starline Luxury Motors, the mood shifted when the invitation arrived. It was hand-delivered by a courier in jeans and a hoodie, which already irked Veronica Cade. She peeled open the envelope with a manicured nail and scanned the message. Her brow furrowed. "Reginald Fairbanks?" she whispered. The name hit like a thunderclap. A junior associate named Evan was nearby, eavesdropping shamelessly. "Wait, Fairbanks? As in Fairbanks Trust? That's him." Veronica's hand trembled slightly as she read the invitation again. She pulled out her phone, scrolled furiously, and stared in growing horror at a Google image search. There he was, same corduroy jacket, same paisley tie, at the opening of an international economic summit. Forbes had once named him one of the silent titans of American wealth. His net worth hovered around $4.8 billion, and she had thrown him out for looking like someone's eccentric uncle. "We made a mistake," she muttered. But that didn't stop what came next. Within 48 hours, Starline's supply line began to clog. The Valkyr SS, which was supposed to be their marquee model for the quarter, was now inexplicably delayed indefinitely across all Southern California locations. Clients were irate. Deposits were refunded. The corporate office was flooded with calls. Veronica's own phone buzzed nonstop. Meanwhile, across town, the grand unveiling was being assembled at the iconic Griffith Observatory, a location Reggie had leased out for the night. The invitations were exclusive, but not for celebrities or executives. They were for veterans, small business owners, bus drivers, janitors, school teachers, anyone Reggie felt deserved luxury more than those who wore it like armor. By Saturday night, dozens of guests had arrived to the soft glow of string lights under the LA skyline. A string quartet played Sinatra, and Lenny Kimura himself walked attendees through the redesigned Valkyrs, elegant but unpretentious, powerful yet accessible. Reggie stood near the champagne table, wearing the same patch jacket and a fresh smile. Hank nudged him. "You gonna say something?" Reggie nodded and stepped up to the microphone. "My name's Reggie Fairbanks," he began, "and I was once told I didn't look the part. So I figured maybe we need a new definition of what the part should look like." The applause that followed Reggie's speech wasn't polite. It was thunderous. It wasn't just for the cars or the champagne. It was for the sheer audacity of the moment. A man who could have stayed hidden behind lawyers and private jets had stepped into the spotlight in wrinkled corduroy, taken a slap to the face, and turned it into a movement. Guests wandered through the glowing rows of Valkyr SS Fairbanks editions, each one customized in bold, individualistic styles, some with hand-stitched leather interiors, others with artwork by local street artists painted under the hoods. Instead of sales reps, volunteers explained features. A high school robotics club demonstrated the onboard AI tech. Everything about the night screamed anti-elitist luxury. Then something happened that Reggie hadn't entirely planned. Local news vans started pulling up at the observatory's gates. Someone, maybe a guest, maybe a Starline mole, had tipped off the media. Channel 4 came first, then TMZ, then a swarm of others. By the time Reggie finished his second glass of Prosecco, the courtyard swarmed with cameras, microphones, and breathless reporters. "Mr. Fairbanks, is it true Starline kicked you out because of your clothes? What do you say to accusations that this was a publicity stunt? Are you declaring war on the luxury industry?" Reggie gave no direct answers. Instead, he chuckled softly, raised his glass, and said into the microphones, "Everyone's welcome here. No tuxedos required." That clip spread like wildfire. Overnight, it hit every major network and platform. Twitter boiled with hashtags. Hashtag Fairbanks Effect. Hashtag Quarter Revolution. Hashtag Luxury for Everyone. Memes popped up. Reggie sitting on the Pinto, overlaid with "Don't judge the jacket, judge the legacy." Starline's PR team scrambled. Corporate issued a carefully worded apology that read more like legal shielding than sincerity. "We regret the misunderstanding and reaffirm our commitment to serving all clients with dignity." But the public wasn't buying it. Cancel culture loomed. Influencers dropped their Starline collaborations. Celebrities tweeted support for Reggie. Then came an even bigger surprise. Among the crowd that night was Dana Collins, a powerhouse venture capitalist. She'd backed the likes of Tesla and Rivian before anyone knew those names. But she wasn't dressed for business. She wore sneakers and a hoodie, blending in with the crowd. After her second test drive in a Valkyr SS with hand-painted panels, she approached Reggie with a glint in her eye. "You ever think about making these permanent?" she asked. He raised an eyebrow. "You want me to start a car company at 82? Dana smirked. "I want you to start a rebellion." Behind her, Lenny Kimura, still greasy from fine-tuning engines, grinned wide. "We already have the blueprints, boss." Reggie looked out at the crowd, at the laughter, the joy, the normal people behind the wheel of power. He'd spent his whole life collecting riches. Maybe now it was time to build something bigger. 2 weeks later, a discreet filing was made with the California Department of Motor Vehicles, Fairbanks Motors Incorporated. The registered CEO? Reginald A. Fairbanks. The address? A former warehouse in East Los Angeles, already buzzing with the sounds of welding torches and design teams scribbling on whiteboards. Word spread fast. This wasn't some PR gimmick. Reggie was launching a real car company, and it was already attracting talent from Tesla, Lucid, and even disgruntled ex-Starline engineers. Lenny Kimura was officially named Chief Design Officer. Dana Collins joined as Chief Strategy Partner. Within a month, they had nearly 24 employees and a wait list of over 4,000 customers. The company's mission was simple: make luxury cars accessible without sacrificing soul. No gatekeeping, no snobbery, no tuxedos. Fairbanks Motors would allow buyers to customize vehicles online with AI-assisted personalization tools. Customers could choose between traditional builds or collaborative community-designed editions. Every car would carry Reggie's signature somewhere inside, on a copper coin embedded in the dash that read, "Merit over manner." Starline Motors watched the chaos unfold with growing panic. The Valkyr SS, once a status symbol, now looked like a relic of arrogance. Executives began meeting in emergency strategy sessions. A CEO named Douglas Meacham issued a public statement, thinly veiled in sarcasm. "We wish Mr. Fairbanks well in his endeavor to democratize luxury. Of course, quality comes with standards, and standards come with presentation." But the public didn't care. In fact, Reggie's story struck a nerve deeper than he expected. It wasn't just about wealth or cars. It was about recognition. Every nurse who'd been ignored in a boutique, every teacher denied service at a high-end store, every retiree dismissed because of how they looked, they saw themselves in Reggie's rebellion. He received letters, thousands of them, from strangers across the country. One came from a man in Pittsburgh. "You made me feel like it's okay to walk into the room as I am." Despite his age, Reggie was more energized than ever. He rose each day at 5 a.m., reviewed engineering specs with Lenny, hosted virtual town halls, and even started mentoring 2 young apprentices, both teenagers from Compton who'd won scholarships to intern at Fairbanks Motors. But not everyone was cheering. One morning, Hank walked into Reggie's office, jaw tight. "You need to see this," he said, dropping a manila folder on the desk. Inside were court documents. Starline Motors had filed a lawsuit. They were suing Fairbanks Motors for alleged corporate sabotage and intentional disruption of supply chains. Reggie chuckled bitterly, running his fingers through his white hair. "They're playing dirty now." Lenny stormed in seconds later. "Let them try. I didn't leave Starline just to get scared by lawyers." Dana's voice came from behind. "This isn't just a car company anymore, Reg. It's a war." Reggie looked up, eyes still full of fire. "Then it's time we fought like we mean it." The lawsuit hit national headlines within hours. Luxury giant Starline sues 82-year-old entrepreneur over car revolution. The headline alone turned public opinion into a tidal wave. Instead of intimidating Fairbanks Motors, Starline had unintentionally poured gasoline on a cultural fire. Late-night hosts made jokes about Reggie being America's most dangerous grandpa. Talk shows debated whether the luxury industry had lost touch with reality. Even Senator Louise Armstrong tweeted, "I stand with Reggie. Luxury should welcome everyone, not just the dressed-up few." Still, inside the Fairbanks Motors warehouse, the mood was tense. The legal team, led by a brilliant but intense former tech litigator named Jamal Klein, laid it out plainly. "They're trying to bleed us dry. It's not about winning the case. It's about burying us in delays and legal fees." Reggie, calm but steel-eyed, looked around the room at his team. Lenny, arms crossed and grease on his shirt. Dana, pacing in heels. Jamal flipping through documents. and the two interns, watching wide-eyed from the back. Then we fight in court, Reggie said. And we fight in the street. Not literally, of course, but symbolically. Dana came up with a strategy. Instead of hiding behind the lawsuit, they'd doubled down on transparency. They'd live-stream the company's daily work, the design sessions, engineering tests, even budget meetings. Let people see we're not some shady startup. We're a family of builders. The Open Garage series launched on YouTube and TikTok. It showed everything, from Reggie testing seat ergonomics with a bad hip, to Lenny welding under a chassis, to Dana clashing with marketing interns over color names like Sunset Grit and Urban Thunder. It was messy, it was raw, and people loved it. Meanwhile, Jamal counterattacked. He filed a motion to unseal Starlene's internal memos, suggesting anti-competitive practices. His team discovered a bombshell. Starlene had tried to block third-party suppliers from working with Fairbanks Motors, even threatening to blacklist some engineers. The story exploded. Suddenly, it wasn't Reggie on trial. It was the entire elitist structure of the luxury automotive world. Then, in the midst of the legal drama, something unexpected happened. A small dealership in Denver broke ranks. Tired of Starlene's policies and inspired by Reggie's movement, they sent a public letter. We want to sell Fairbanks cars. No suits required. Reggie teared up reading it. That's one crack, he whispered. Hank put a hand on his shoulder. Just the first. The dam's gonna break. That same night, Reggie received a message from an old friend, a man who had once been his fiercest rival in the finance world. The message read, I've watched from the sidelines long enough. I want in. Let's finish what we started in '89. Reggie stared at the screen. It was a name he hadn't seen in decades, and it meant that things were about to get even more complicated. The message came from Charles Langford, a name that once carried as much weight on Wall Street as Fairbanks. In the late '80s, Charles and Reggie had co-founded a financial empire, until a bitter fallout over ethical differences tore them apart. Charles had chosen ruthless ambition. Reggie had chosen the long road. They hadn't spoken in over 30 years. Now, the prodigal titan wanted in. Dana was wary. He's got deep pockets and a deeper trail of burned bridges. Reggie read the message again, quiet. He also has enemies in common with us. And the memory of betrayal can sometimes be the best blueprint for trust. Against the advice of nearly everyone, Reggie agreed to a meeting. It was held at a private hangar in Burbank under tight security. Charles Langford arrived in a tailored Navy suit, his signature gold watch glinting like old money. But the moment he saw Reggie, he broke into a boyish grin. You still wearing that ragged coat, he said. You still mistaking polish for substance? Reggie replied. They hugged. Inside the hangar, Charles laid out his offer. A $50 million investment, complete access to international logistics, and connections to factories in Ohio and Michigan that were lying dormant since the last recession. Factories filled with good people, Charles said. They just need something worth believing in. Reggie studied him. And what do you believe in now, Charlie? Charles didn't blink. Redemption. By the following week, Fairbanks Motors had doubled its workforce. Factories reopened. Engineers were hired by the dozen. Mechanics who hadn't had steady work in years were flown to LA for training. But with rapid growth came new problems. Quality control began to strain under the pressure. A prototype malfunctioned during a demo live stream. Nothing dangerous, but enough to send the comments section into a frenzy. Critics seized on it. Has Reggie expanded too fast? Fairbanks Motors wobbling under its own hype. Starlene pounced. They launched a counter-campaign, Luxury with Legacy. Glossy commercials flooded screens featuring old-money families, polo matches, and sterile perfection. Their message was clear, Reggie was noise. Starlene was tradition. Yet despite the pressure, Reggie refused to retreat. He gathered the team one night in the East L.A. garage. They were exhausted, some working 16-hour days. Interns sleeping in office chairs. Dana was on her third energy drink. Reggie stood on a workbench and addressed them all. We're not just building cars, he said. We're building proof that character matters. That access matters. That the tired, the overlooked, and the uninvited deserve the keys to something powerful. There was a long silence. Then one of the interns raised his phone and began chanting softly, Merit over manner. Another joint, then another, until the entire warehouse echoed with the words, Merit over manner. Merit over manner. Reggie smiled. Not with pride, but with purpose. Because this wasn't just a company anymore. It was a revolution. By fall, Fairbanks Motors had transformed from a rogue startup into a national phenomenon. The company's flagship model, the Valkyr SS, Fairbanks Edition, began shipping to customers in California, Nevada, and Colorado. Lines wrapped around local unveiling events like it was the launch of the next iPhone. Except instead of influencers and elites, the attendees were nurses, welders, school bus drivers, and single moms. And they weren't just buying cars. They were buying into something. Fairbanks Motors introduced a customer honor board called the Wall of Everyday Legends, where each owner could submit a story of perseverance. The stories were printed, framed, and hung in the East L.A. warehouse. Reggie made it a point to read 5 every morning before meetings. But success painted a target on their back. Charles Langford's past came roaring into the present when a scandal broke on a tech blog. In 2003, Charles had allegedly orchestrated a hostile takeover that left hundreds jobless. It wasn't news to Reggie. He'd lived the fallout. But it was news to the press. Why partner with a corporate villain? Critics asked. Has Fairbanks Motors lost its moral compass? Reggie didn't hide. He held a press conference on a gray Tuesday, standing beside Charles. Redemption doesn't mean forgetting the past, Reggie said. It means using it to build better. I trust Charles because he's building this with me, for the right reasons. Charles took the mic, his voice shaking. I've never apologized for the lives I disrupted. But I'm here to say I was wrong. And I'm putting every dollar I have toward making something good out of what I broke. The backlash slowed. But it didn't stop the shadows. That same week, Reggie received a warning from Jamal, the company's attorney. Starlene has escalated. They're not just fighting in court now. They've hired political lobbyists to stall our factory permits. Indeed, within days, city inspections were delayed. Supply chains slowed. A Fairbanks Motors warehouse in Ohio was temporarily shut down due to zoning violations that hadn't existed a week earlier. They're trying to choke us out, Dana said during an emergency call. From the inside. Reggie listened quietly, staring at a worn photograph on his desk, his late wife, Maria, beside him on the porch of their Vermont cabin. She'd always believed in doing good, not just being good. I won't let this become a victim story, he said. If they want a war, we'll give them a story no one forgets. His plan? Take the fight to Washington. The next morning, Reggie boarded a private jet bound for D.C., flanked by Dana, Jamal, and 2 working-class car owners turned advocates. They weren't going to beg. They were going to testify. Before Congress, the Capitol Rotunda was colder than Reggie remembered. It had been decades since he last walked its marble halls, back when he was funding community investment bills and shaking hands with presidents. Now, at 82, he returned not as a financier, but as a fighter. Word of his appearance before Congress spread quickly. The hearing, officially titled Innovation, Accessibility, and Fair Competition in the Automotive Sector, had been pushed forward after growing public interest and pressure from advocacy groups. Media outlets dubbed it the Fairbanks hearing. Reggie entered the chamber in his signature corduroy coat, flanked by Dana in a crisp navy pantsuit, Jamal with a thick binder under his arm, and the 2 citizen speakers. Rosa Martinez, a public school teacher from Bakersfield who had saved for 2 years to buy a Fairbanks Valkyr, and Malik Turner, a Detroit factory worker who had been unemployed until the Ohio plant reopened. The panel of senators looked skeptical, especially the ones deep in the pockets of legacy automakers. The first 30 minutes were dry. Dana presented data on Fairbanks Motors' growth and employment impact. Jamal outlined the legal obstructions. But it wasn't until Reggie took the microphone that the room changed. I was thrown out of a dealership, he began, because I didn't look rich. Because I didn't look like someone who belonged. And instead of fighting with anger, I built something that gave people like me, and unlike me, the keys to the future. He motioned toward Rosa and Malik. They believed in our cars before Wall Street did. They deserved to be heard more than anyone. Rosa stepped forward and told the story of being denied service at luxury stores despite years of savings. Malik described how Fairbanks Motors gave him purpose again after years of joblessness. And then Reggie closed with a line that trended globally within the hour. This isn't about cars. It's about who we believe deserves dignity. If competition is fair, then let us compete. But if legacy means sabotage, then legacy needs to be dismantled. The gallery erupted in applause, uncommon for such hearings. Even a few senators clapped. That night, Reggie's testimony aired on every network. Clips flooded social media. A petition calling for an antitrust investigation into Starlene crossed 2 million signatures in under 24 hours. But as the Fairbanks team flew back to L.A., there was one problem. Back at the East L.A. warehouse, someone had broken in. And they hadn't just taken computers. They'd stolen blueprints. The break-in was clean, calculated, and deeply personal. No smashed windows. No mess. Just a single locked cabinet pried open and 3 digital drives missing. Drives that held the future designs of Fairbanks Motors. Among them, the prototype for their next model, the Civic Wolf, an electric SUV built for rugged durability with a price tag lower than any competitor could match. Security footage showed 2 masked individuals. Military precision, zero hesitation. They knew exactly what to take and what to leave behind. Reggie stood in the middle of the warehouse as police dusted for prints. His team watched him carefully. Lenny was pacing. Dana was stone-faced. Jamal was already calling a federal contact. But Reggie? He was still. Starlene. Hank asked quietly. Reggie didn't answer. He just walked to his office, shut the door, and stood by the window overlooking the production floor. The theft hurt, but not because of the designs. It hurt because they'd finally rattled him. He'd built this company not just as an act of rebellion, but as a legacy. A legacy they were now trying to steal and mass-produce into another cold, exclusive machine. The next morning, Dana burst in with her tablet. "You need to see this," she said. Starlene had announced a new partnership with a mysterious development lab. In the promo reel, a vehicle that bore a suspicious resemblance to the stolen Civic Wolf prototype. Rebranded. Sterilized. White leather interiors and champagne holders. They were going to beat Reggie to the release by 2 months. For the first time, Reggie sat down without speaking. And then he asked, "How fast can we launch?" Lenny answered instantly. 6 weeks. If we work around the clock. Dana hesitated. We'd be cutting every corner. Shipping without pre-orders. Relying on direct delivery. Reggie nodded. Good. We ship. We deliver. We drive. What does that mean? Jamal asked. Reggie smiled. It means we don't announce the launch. We arrive. 6 weeks later, in the dead of night, hundreds of Fairbanks Motors employees across 5 states climbed into freshly built Civic Wolves. No press releases. No red carpets. Just headlights and heart. They drove the cars themselves to schools, farms, firehouses, and community centers. No dealers. No price hikes. No gatekeepers. Just a knock on the door and a set of keys. By morning, #WeDeliver was the #1 trend worldwide. Starlene's press event fell flat. The stolen prototype looked soulless next to footage of firefighters hugging drivers, kids climbing into the back seats, and single moms breaking down at the wheel of a car they thought they'd never afford. Reggie stood at the front of the warehouse, watching the footage roll in. Hank handed him a coffee. You did it. Reggie smiled, his eyes misty. We did it. 3 months later, the court ruled in Fairbanks Motors' favor. The antitrust probe against Starlene expanded into federal territory. Public opinion never swung back. And Reginald Fairbanks? He never entered another dealership again. Because he didn't have to. He built one for everyone.